This is Leader with Navia. Today, with a very special guest. I've been waiting to have this woman here since January. Now we did it. We made it happen. But first, let me introduce myself for the ones who haven't watched the program before. I'm a white woman with short red hair. I'm wearing a two-color shirt, black and red, with a necklace that is white and black. And behind me, I have a white board, and at the corner, I have a gray wall full of Wonder Womans and things like that. This program, I have been having conversations with C-level leaders since June 2010, in 2020. I always say that this was my vaccine, my mental vaccine against this pandemic, because I have been bringing very inspiring leaders to talk to us since then, for almost 2 years now. And this is my conversation number 168. Yeah, and today I have this very special guest that has a very unique name. That's her secret superpower, Soyini Chang. I hope I had pronounced it right. And she's an amazing leader, diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging leader. And she's gonna tell us everything about what she does as her job. She's the co-founder and CEO of Quantum Power Skills, and she's also a mom, a wife, a daughter, and she has a very unique mix of cultures in herself. So she's gonna tell us everything about this. Welcome, my dear.
Hi, Nevia. Thank you so much for having me. Like you said, this has been a long time coming. And so I'm super happy that we got a chance to do this today. And then especially after Mother's Day weekend, right?
Yeah,
So happy belated Mother's Day to you.
yeah, thank you. The same to you.
Thank you.
And tell us who you are.
Okay.
From
Yeah.
the beginning, from the very beginning.
Well, I won't tell my age, but yeah. Look, I am, as you mentioned, I am a woman, a BIPOC woman, Black woman. But I originally am from Kingston, Jamaica, and my parents they moved here when I was young. I was still a toddler, and came to America for opportunity, like so many other first generation immigrants do. I later became a naturalized citizen. Let's see, probably around my middle school years, I remember going and getting sworn in. And that was definitely something that was really important in our family. And it was just a moment in time that I remember. But yeah, my background is I'm Jamaican, but have been raised in the States, mostly in Florida. And my mother is Jamaican and my father is a Jamaican Chinese. And
Wow.
so his background is a mixture of, there's Black descent or African descent, as well as Chinese descent there. And so both of my great grandparents on my father's side, they're from Hong Kong, is what I've discovered and learned. We have an uncle who has done all of the due diligence to find out what village our family is from in China, what happened, so that we have more of our story. So many people of color who are so many people of color don't necessarily know their lineage.
Yeah.
Because of slavery. And so I was just excited and happy that we have an uncle a grand uncle who we've come to love and learn so much about him, because he's taken the time to figure this out and help us piece our story together and learn more about our background. But yeah, I grew up, in this sort of, although raised in the States, and that was also a dynamic culturally, but culturally within my home, we really had a real fusion of just experiences and food. Obviously, in Jamaica, we speak the language patois, which is a fusion of various dialects that stem from Africa, as well as some from China and from East India. Some of the words and language words that we use, and so we spoke patois in the house, and just like any other family. But yeah, I think I had, what I will say, definitely a very kind of, I guess you would say, stereotypical first generation immigrant family upbringing. But add to that the Jamaican culture. I think one of the things that was really, really phenomenal that we learned from our upbringing was just our cultural legacy when it comes to strength and when it comes to tenacity and really just having a strong fighting spirit. And look no further than some of our forefathers like Bob Marley and the music that came from that man, and how prophetic it was and how relevant it is and timeless it is. And so, when you're raised with influences like that,
Yeah.
Marcus Garvey and Bob Marley and, Nanny of the Maroons and what they did on the island, and, that you can't help but to feel empowered by that and the richness of it.
And how about studies and your actual family? How did you raise your family?
Oh, yeah. Studies, like what I studied in school, I was started off like many Caribbeans, where we think there's only 5 jobs. So when you're a child,
It still happens here in Brazil.
yeah, exactly. When you're a kid, if you tell your parents you love to help people, that means you want to be a doctor.
Yeah.
If you tell your parents that you can debate and argue, you want to be a lawyer.
A lawyer.
Right? If you tell your parents that you like children and you love to hang around them, you're going to be a teacher.
A teacher.
Right. So you know where this is going. It's really only 5 career paths really that, we talk about in the household. So I was that child that said, hey, I want to help people. I had this really, really, just as a child, compassionate spirit around helping others, especially anybody that was sick or anyone who was hurt or had been hurt. I always had this affinity towards helping others. And so as a child, I just knew that meant, okay, I want to be a doctor. Say all that to say, I changed my major in college after my second year, in my sophomore year, from pre-med to economics.
Wow.
Yeah.
What a change.
Yeah, it was a big change because it was organic chemistry too. I think it was after that organic chemistry 2 class, I was like, I don't think this is really my calling. I don't think this is really my purpose. I know I want to help people, but I don't think I'm supposed to be a doctor.
I don't have to go through this.
Right. I couldn't do it anymore. And so like many, after my sophomore year, I did the best that I could. And after that, I changed my major into something more business oriented. And I knew I always had a knack for business, but I didn't quite, I'll be honest, I didn't quite know how to explain that to my parents. It was a tough conversation. Hey, I'm not going to be a doctor anymore, but I'm really interested in business. And they're quite, of course, they're like, what does that mean? How are you going to support yourself? How are you going to live? And so I changed my major to economics. And when I finished school, my first job was in technology.
Wow.
But on the business side, when it came to electronic data interchange, I was an EDI, I was an analyst. And when I say on the business side, all of the transactions when it comes to codes and health codes and all these other things, they're all connected to a number. And because all of the exchange is happening from the portal that's in the system at the hospital, which gets translated into the billing system, which equates to, payments and receivables for for the company. So I was excited to know that I was doing something that was helpful. And I did enjoy it because it really get to utilize my analytical side of my mind and problem solving. I definitely was advocate of just like figuring things out and wanting to understand how does that work. So fast forward after that, later on in doing that, working for a couple of companies in EDI, and then getting married and having children, right? At that point, it was just like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do career wise? But also like, I really wanted to be a hands-on mom. And, women, we have this conversation with
Yeah.
ourselves where we're like, okay, there's only 24 hours in a day. Okay. They say 8 of them should be used for sleeping, right? Okay. We know that's not really happening, but we'll try our best to get to 8. You got 16 hours left, right? And so how are you using that 16 hours? And I was trying to figure out, raising children and being hands-on, and then also like how do I still nurture the side of me that wants to be career oriented and has dreams other than just being a mother, which again, and a mother and a wife, it's so much more to the story as a woman that you want to be able to fully express yourself on. And I think that entrepreneurship was certainly the pathway for me. Like, it was the way that allowed me to do all the things I wanted to do. I could help people. I was able to solve problems. I've built my career on standing in the gap, so to speak. So I've built a success of different types of businesses that I've co-founded or was CEO of, where I was able to focus on closing an achievement gap or standing in that gap and building from there. And it allowed me the flexibility, which also allowed me the ability to still be with my children, and to be hands-on in raising them. Doesn't mean that it was easier. I will say that. That's not for sure. I mean, I wouldn't say easy is any part of this experience at all. It's not, but certainly fulfilling. And it was great to be able to try to figure out how to balance that out. I think even now I look back, over the past 16 years, I'm like, wow, now this models on work-life integration and work-life harmony. This is a core part of success stories for organizations.
Yeah.
And it's necessary now versus back in the day when I started, it wasn't necessarily always acceptable for you to be trying to be that entrepreneur. You have a child here that's on the screen in a Zoom or something like that. It was just like not seen as professional.
Yeah.
And so now, after the pandemic, I'm like, wow, everything has really shifted a lot. And it's time. You look at, we're in the 21st century, and women, we want to have we want to have our seat at the table as well. And then we should, because our voice is necessary and needed to solve big problems and to make decisions that affect the world. And if that means that the baby's going to be, in the rocking chair beside you while you're sitting there, having a conversation with other decision makers, then why not? We should.
Yeah, that's okay. We need to do that.
Yeah. And go ahead.
It's part of the life.
Yeah, it is. It is part of the life. And I think in the 21st century, it's just everything is just a matter of time of some of these things happening, and sort of everyone sort of catching up with just the framework of how we're going to live our lives. But the pandemic certainly accelerated that. I do believe it was a catalyst. So I say all that to say, when I went to be a stay-at-home mom, I was doing that for about 8 years. And during that time, I home birthed my children and I homeschooled them. So I had my daughters in the bathtub, which was quite frankly an extremely, it was a painful process, but it was an amazing experience to home water birth them. And then I homeschooled them, and I had a homeschool cooperative that I was managing with myself and other families, where we had enough like-mindedness in our values and our perspectives on education. We wanted to give them a unique educational experience. And so we were doing that, and that became the genesis of a business I started called Bright Learning Academy, which was an education company, a nonprofit that was focused on closing the achievement gap. So some of the discoveries that were made as far as learning styles when it came to, well, at the co-op, there were so many children, various learning styles, various productivity styles. And it was just like, there's a lot of dimensions of diversity here. But how do you tailor to that child so that they feel empowered in their learning? And when they're in school, a teacher has to really teach to the way majority of children learn,
Yeah.
right? And so they didn't get that kind of customization, but we were able to provide that in the co-op, and that became really the sort of proprietary learning system of how we did things at Bright Learning Academy. And then I had continued before that, I should say, before that, I went back to school and got my master's in education because, again, I knew my heart was always in helping
Helping
people.
people.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, there goes that story again, right? It was always about
Yeah.
helping people, and in this case, it was helping children. And I knew with education, it just became. I have this like I have this desire to learn a lot. I'm always have been an avid learner and love to learn new and different things and see things through different perspectives and lenses and talk to people and listen to them. And so that that part just got built on, even further being an educator. And because of the tutoring company that I had, it allowed me to create different types of curricula, and it allowed me to sort of design assessments and evaluations. I really took a deeper dive into doing those types of things so that you could have a child who was more of a tactile learner and visual. You could teach the lesson plans to how their brain likes to really see things, so to speak. And then from there, you can build up, right? You can differentiate after. But that was really like the starting point of really helping children see, especially kids we worked with who were considered to be a grade or two grade levels behind. It was really fulfilling work because we could see the gap closing and those children believing in themselves more.
Yeah.
So that seed of hope and belief is just something that's so powerful. Watching that child go through that process, and fast forward, after working with kids, I worked with adults when it came to more training and development. So really, I discovered that training and development was my sweet spot as far as that goes, and started facilitating more workshops and seminars around diversity, equity, and inclusion, and being able to curate content that I hope and pray, that people are receiving very well, to help inspire them, right, to change their mindsets or shifts, make shifts, and so to speak. So that led me into the DEI space, which was the training piece. And then I added the strategy piece to it, alongside the work that I do with Esse. So,
Wow. I just love to learn all this. I love to understand where things began and
yeah,
how they evolved. So it's incredible, long journey and inspiring journey. Thank you for sharing.
absolutely.
And so today, after all this journey, what is your purpose? How do you define your purpose today?
I do define my purpose as to inspire, to be inspired, um, to be inspired and to inspire others, um, and to in inspiring others to uplift my family and to strive to be the best version of myself. There's a quote that I love by Maya Angelou, and she says, um, right may not be expedient, but it will satisfy your soul. Start where you are, be the best human being you can be.
Yeah.
And I actually have that quote at the end of my emails on my personal inbox. It's just a constant reminder of her words. But I just love this idea that, you know, change is constant. And I know, everybody doesn't think change is the greatest thing. It's not the most exciting process. But one of the things I've learned is that if you can embrace change and, shifting things within yourself, whether it's just your viewpoint, your perspective, how much that can reach someone where they are. Like, if you understand that you're a leader and that part of your leadership is being a servant to others, then it's like you can really, you can hear other people's, you can hear their heart, you can hear their story, you can really listen and tune in. And so I just love that quote because it really defines for me like being the best version of yourself, and also meeting people where the intersection of their lives, excuse me, whatever crossroads they're in, but hopefully inspiring them to be the best version of themselves as well.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And how do you define your leadership style?
My leadership style is definitely direct. I would say it's direct. Yeah, it's direct, and it is, but it's warm. It's direct, it's warm, and I feel like most of the people that I've worked with or who've worked with me, I'm more like a leader coach,
Okay.
if that's a style. Um, because I'm still really like, I still always feel like I'm in that facilitator space when I'm
Okay.
teaching people. And so even if you work on the team, um, I'm always wanting to engage, to be inclusive, and to hear your voice and to get your thoughts, to get your feedback. And maybe sometimes people say too much because, like, it doesn't mean you change everything once you get everyone's feedback. But I do think it's just giving people the airspace to ask them the question and hearing what they have to say. Um, I think people really enjoy knowing that they're a part of contributing towards whatever it is that we're doing. And I think that's part of their fulfillment as well in being on the team and working together. So I like to believe that I am a direct leader who's warm, but also very inclusive.
And do you think you had a great change when you just became this entrepreneur woman instead of being part of a team?
I think that, so no, I don't think I really had a big change in that regard because I feel like I had discovered within myself that I'm kind of I don't want to say a loner type, but I definitely have been like comfortable in my skin, sort of being by myself. Um, doesn't mean that I didn't have moments though where I felt uncomfortable, where I felt like, oh, I wish I had some people around me sometimes. Doesn't mean that that never happened, but I have always pretty much been okay working by myself. But then what changed and evolved, especially now in this culture of inclusion and belonging, is building that out virtually, right? Like
Yeah.
how do you build out inclusion and belonging when you have all these virtual platforms now? And I also think that what was really cool, although you're an entrepreneur, you're always aligning yourself with organizations and
Yeah.
thought leaders and strategic partnerships with other organizations who also align with your mission and vision. And so you don't spend so much time by yourself independently. You really are working in this sort of larger ecosystem of team and partnership with others, who have their own businesses as well. And so there's a lot of collaborative effort that's going on.
And for me, there's something that is crucial in all relationships, that is trust. How do you build trust?
Yeah, great question. Trust is one of those things where I'm always like, it takes a long time to build, and it just takes one thing that could go wrong where
Yeah.
it feels like it's broken and it's irreparable.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
It's done. It's forever. Yeah.
You're like, never again, right?
Yeah.
And next thing you know, you're sitting on the sofa eating ice cream, watching rom-coms or something like that because you're sad or whatever happened. You know, you're all melancholy. But yeah, I I I believe that I've built trust through relationships and showing up for people, um, time, honesty, and consistency. I think people when you build relationships with them, they're they're looking for patterns and trend lines as well.
Yeah.
And I think if you're consistent with your trend line, so to speak, you're consistent with who you are and how you show up for them, that's how you build trust. And the rest of it is patience and time. But uh, you only have the bandwidth to build with X amount of people, right? Like I always say, it's like you can't go deep with everybody.
Yeah.
You know, those levels of trust gets deeper, deeper, deeper over time, right? But you're not going to be able to do that with every person you meet. It's not. It's just it's impossible.
Yeah, for sure. And there's something that is very, very keen to me, that is communication.
Yes.
I've done my whole career around communications, and it's hard for me to see still today in the 21st century leaders who don't value communication, who don't invest their time and efforts to develop this ability, because it's an ability that you can develop. And I always ask this question: how was your journey on communications? Was it natural? Was it an
Yeah.
effort? Was it something that being a mom helped you?
Oh yeah. Definitely has helped with motherhood, and especially now with teenagers.
Yeah,
Um,
I got it.
yeah. Oh yeah. I am utilizing all of those Dale Carnegie human relations communication skills as much as possible. And I'll add on there a sprinkle of a bunch of Sigmund Freud stuff from psychoanalysis and psychology. I'm like, we gotta go all in here, you know. But so to talk about my journey on communication, so I'll be honest. So culturally, I'll say that it starts there, right? Everything's modeled at home. And what I learned about just my culture overall is that sometimes we don't talk to each other, we're talking at each other. And so you're like, there's like, we're just sailboats passing by. But I'm like, did we actually connect to one another? Like what we were saying, and we're building on that? Or are you just talking over me and I'm talking? So there's things culturally where, and even some things too that we talk about in DEA, like mansplaining or womansplaining, things of that nature that happens. But I would say, like culturally, I definitely grew up that way, where I was like, are we having a conversation with each other, or are you just talking over me? And so taking that communication style and then speaking in it in such an authoritative way, right? You know, that doesn't help build friends. It doesn't. You're not going to build a lot of allyship,
No.
right? So I would say as a young adult, I really started learning more about communication, because I think I agree with you. I think it's one of the most, it can be easily quoted as maybe one of the most undervalued skills.
Yeah.
But now it's really getting more airspace. Like it is extremely valuable. Warren Buffett has quoted it to be the greatest skill set you could acquire. Invest
Yeah.
in yourself and make communication the greatest skill that you can acquire. And I think about that because I'm just like, once I got into my 20s and I really started shifting and learning and growing and understanding more about communication and how to communicate in a way that's going to either bring people closer together, or you can communicate in a way that will pull people apart. And my mother always jokingly told me as a kid, she was like, you're like a diplomat. She would be like, you're so diplomatic, you know, things that you say. She's like, I don't know if you're saying you agree with me or not. And I'd be like, well, I'm not saying I agree or don't agree. Like there's a lot of gray area there.
Yeah.
It's not have to be black or white. It can be like there's a whole lot of possibilities between here and here. So I remember her always telling me that as a child. And I think that really also became sort of the framework of my communication style too, is being diplomatic and being able to like see both perspectives. But then with that also comes with you challenging yourself to choose what what your decision is, right? Because if you're seeing both sides, you'll get indecisive. You won't make a decision at all.
Yeah.
So you still need to be decisive. But I'd say my communication style evolved from it being like how it was, how I was raised, into becoming way more, just the bandwidth for me when it came to that just expanded further. And especially after I did my studies and so forth with the Dale Carnegie program around how to communicate and how to do so in a way that will genuinely reach people. Um, that shifted that shifted a lot for me as well. It just added more tools in my tool belt. And people have said I'm articulate, but it's just like you don't want to open your mouth and not have something to say that really adds to the conversation, um, or enhances it, right? You just don't want to be speaking to be speaking. So
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
And I always say that inclusion begins with communication.
Oh yes.
And you communicate all the time. I was looking at the numbers, and some say that when you are a leader, you spend around 70 to 90% of your time just communicating. So we should value it.
Yes, it's true. Another part of communication to add to that, that is so it's so counterintuitive, is that communication is a lot about listening.
Yeah, for
It's quite
sure.
the opposite of running your mouth. As an educator, you always used to say you have two ears and one mouth. You should be listening twice as much as you talk. And so, and as much as I knew how to talk a lot, that was easy. But in expanding my skills as a communicator, I had to become just an even greater listener.
Sure, sure. You know, my grandmother, she will be 100 years old this July. And when I was a kid, she always told me that, listen, you have 2 ears and one mouth. So listen more than talk. And how do you deal with your own vulnerability?
Wow, that's a great question. I think now at this season of my life and in my career, I have come to embrace vulnerability as a point of empowerment. Actually, I didn't always see it that way growing up,
Yeah,
and it definitely has changed the lens that I see on it now. I think there is power in vulnerability and transparency. And I don't think, you have to tell everything, right? I think that's taking the balance, the scales all the way to the other side. But I do think that if you're going to allow people in, you're going to do so through vulnerability, because that's where we get to the heart of stuff. That's where we really can relate to one another. I think that's the seed that gets planted that helps us to grow those relationships where we talked about trust. And we talked about sustaining them over a long period of time, that it means that we have to have that vulnerability. And I think leaders who really understand that vulnerability is really about caring, they get it.
yeah, yeah. But it wasn't quite that easy for anyone. It's a journey. Yeah, we were raised to be leaders that have all the answers,
Oh,
that are superhumans. So
yeah,
it it's an unbuilding process.
yeah, it's unlearning
Yeah,
all of that and
yeah,
starting almost like with a blank canvas. Because you're right, we did walk around with that superwoman syndrome, or we did walk around thinking that we needed to have it all figured out.
yeah.
Um, and again, the moment you think you have it all figured out is the moment you don't have it all figured
Yeah.
out, right?
Yeah.
Like, actually, no, I don't have a grasp on this, and it's probably better that I mention this to my team. Hey, this is what I do know. This is what we can do. These are the possibilities we've looked at. What do you think? And again, just drawing in from that thought diversity on your own team and making it a more inclusive decision, versus just you thinking that I need to have all the answers. But being vulnerable, I think it shows people that you're relatable and that you're human.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
I and it's nothing else. We are certainly learning more now than ever how to operationalize a humanness standard, in our operating procedures, right?
Yeah.
In how we interact with each other on a daily basis. And that affects and impacts how we treat one another. So being vulnerable means that, to me, it means that we care.
Yeah. And how do you deal with mistakes? Your own mistakes
Oh,
and
yeah.
others' mistakes.
So I'll say, like, with my friends, when it comes to mistakes, I mean, they'll call me out on it. I mean, it's just like, okay, you got it. I'm not going to I come from a strong-minded West Indian, Caribbean family, Jamaican family. And so everyone has an opinion, right? Everybody, right? And everybody can tell you, what to do and how to do it. And so, like, if you're wrong, you're going to know you're wrong before you even know you're wrong. They're going to call you out on it. They're going to tell you about it. It's just the way that it is. It's just raw and honest in that regard. So yeah, in my family and with my close friends, I mean, if I'm wrong, I make a mistake, they can literally just be like, just let me know. I'm like, okay, I surrender. There's no reason. There's no reason. As they say, never argue with a woman when she's right, or a man. It's a waste of time. When it comes to my teams and when it comes to working with clients, I literally will tell a client, I'll say, I made a mistake. I think I had an error there, and I'll let them know. And then I will let them know how I can what's the corrective course of action to take, and how can we do it better. I have no problem telling a client, if they ask me a question, I have no problem saying, I don't know. I know this part, but I don't know that part. Let me get back to you. So that hopefully I can avoid making the mistake. I'm really an advocate of preventative care. So it's like I'm always thinking in my mind, and maybe it's a little bit more cautious, but I'm always thinking in my mind, what can I do? How can we prepare or do things even better so that the next time around it's easier, more fluid, more streamlined, more efficient, but just a better experience for the recipient. So yeah, if it's a client or somebody on our team, I have no problem saying, my bad, made a mistake, calling myself out of it, calling myself out on it. And if they call me out on it, I don't even mind making a joke about it. Right?
That's it. It
Yeah.
happens. Yeah.
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 I don't mind. When I was younger, probably I was way more stubborn and didn't
Yeah.
like that, but no, at this age, oh yeah, I'll be like, let's crack a joke about it. And it might come up in another meeting. Remember when you did? Da, da, da. I'm like, oh yeah. So,
And what is the role? You already talked about this, but I want you to summarize this. What is the role that maternity plays in your life? What does it mean to you being a mom?
oh man, I know it's cheesy, but they are my world. It's just what it is. I can't even say anything. There's nothing I can say about it. Like, being a mother is truly it's even the core of how I lead. I mean, it really it's at the core of how I lead, and the skills that I've learned in being a mother, being a listener, being a better communicator, working through disagreements, right? Having your children helps you to start building a lot of these core competencies, let's just say, and skill sets, and you can use them, and you should use them, in outside of just your home. But being a mom has definitely been the driver for how I have shown up to try to be the best version of myself. Your children will
Yeah.
inspire you to be a better you.
Yeah.
One, because you want them to be better, right? You want the best for them, and you want the best for their friends and the people that they love and that you love. But also, they just inspire you be the best you, because you're like, if I'm going to teach it to you, I need to model it. And I think that's the challenging part for parents. It's like, oh my gosh, we're not in a time anymore where you can just do what I say, but don't do as I do. What was that saying?
Yeah,
Do what I
yeah, we
say, but
say
don't
that.
do as I
Yeah,
do, right?
yeah,
We're not in that time anymore. I mean, your children are watching you and they're
yeah,
paying attention and they're so bright. They ask the questions. They're like, hey, how come you did da 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 da? And then in that situation, you did da 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 da. So you have to be ready, willing, and able to have these sort of thought-provoking conversations with them, that's going to build them up and prepare them for the same types of conversations, experiences, and problems they're going to solve in life. But I would definitely say motherhood has been the driving force, at the core of it when it came to me wanting to just be the best version of myself. Children have certainly inspired me to do that, being a mom. And I don't know if something else would have. I'm sure maybe something else would have too, but I just know motherhood has certainly, pushed me to lengths and to spaces and places I just never thought I even had inside of myself. I didn't even know it was
yes.
there. It was like dormant or something. And having them truly woke it up.
I totally agree with you. I always say that to my girls.
Yeah.
It's they brought out the best on me, and some strength that I didn't have any conscious that I had. So
Yeah.
it's about that. Yeah,
It really is. You're
yeah,
spot on with that. I tell my girls, and this is what I say because I've said to them, I don't know why you chose me to be your mom, but I'm so grateful that you did. I
yeah,
literally will express gratitude for them. I'm like, I am really grateful that you chose me to be your mom. And I just want to be the best facilitator or teacher that I can with them. And to support them and be an encouragement and an inspiration. And I know it's a lot of titles that we wear on ourselves as moms. It's a lot, but you know what? It gets easier over time. It starts to feel a way more, it's just gets way more effortless for you to show up that way.
yeah,
And if you show up that way for your family and friends, it's going to be easy for you to show up that way at work too. You know?
yeah, yeah. Totally agree. And from all your experience in the diversity, equity, and inclusion work and environment, what is, in your opinion, the biggest challenge that we have in our corporations to really build an inclusive culture and to really have inclusive leaders?
Mm. Well, one thing I would say is inclusive leadership means that leaders have to show up. They have to be trained and educated on inclusion as well. Um, I do believe that sort of the fast track to elevating diversity, equity, inclusion is through leaders. And if they shift and change, it will inspire the rest of the corporation as well and anybody that they're managing and working with. And so I think that if we can influence and impact leaders, we can influence and impact the world. But I say all that to say that to answer your question, I think one of the biggest challenges is around, um, really perspective, shifting people's perspective and helping them to see things the same image, but in a different way. There's always that, one of the trainings that it's like you see a picture, but you can see three different images in the picture. It all depends on what pops out at you. And they say wherever your attention goes, it grows. And so if the first thing that pops out of you is that thing, you don't see anything else.
Yeah,
You won't see anything else because your attention is on that specific image and your attention is on what you think it is, and you're not seeing anything else outside of that. And so I think that one of the biggest barriers when it comes to culture changing and shifting is around the mind. The science and the data is out there that supports the neurology of the brain and how, when you think about people's life experiences, how much trapped they are in their own trauma, whether it's things that happen to them younger or whatever, but they're trapped in that sort of psychosis. And it's like it's a revolving door. It just keeps showing up. And so they're stuck on seeing things a certain way. And that becomes a big challenge when it comes to change management for us. Um, I think another big challenge is the activism that's happening on the externally, whether it's politically and socially. That activism is creating a lot of pressure, and it's creating a lot of, let's just say, I'll even say it's creating a lot of innovation because it's forcing us to
Yeah.
come up with new solutions, right? And to think differently and to be inclusive about thought diversity, right? To be inclusive about the types of solutions we come up with and making sure that we have representation of all people in those conversations so that we can come up with some of the better solutions. But I would definitely say, like, sort of paradigm shifting, perspective shifting is one of the biggest challenges. And I think, too, um, this conversation that we have around equity, people really flexing their mindset that equity is not about poverty, and equity is not about, um, you know, oh, we're going to give reparations. We're going to just fix this by just giving reparations to a certain race or giving out handouts to a certain group of people. That's not what equity is about. And once we can get everybody sort of standardized and normalcy on even just the verbiage, that alone, to get that standardized so that we all have the same definition of equity, we all have
Mm-hmm.
the same definition of inclusion, we all have the same definition of diversity, that we can kind of start from there. But right now, we still don't even have that uniform yet.
Yeah.
We're still working towards that. But people understanding that equity doesn't equal poverty, it actually means more abundance, and it actually equates to more abundance for the masses and not just for a select few. Um, and it and I think also the other big challenge we have in DEI is, we need innovative thought leaders. We need all generations to be thinking of how do we create infrastructure around all of this? Because there's a new system that's brewing. It's being creative, it's being created now in business, with regards to how employees show up and how leaders show up in their organization. It matters. And so with this shift happening in the system, then that means that we have to create the support around it, right? And so
Yeah.
I think that that's, um, one of the big challenges, but certainly getting everybody sort of on the same headspace when it comes to even just baseline understanding, that's a challenge.
Yeah. So, the US and Brazil are very racist countries. How do you deal with prejudice, and how do you empower your girls to deal with prejudice that it's still present in our lives?
Yeah. Um, I try to phrase it in a way, I actually try to phrase it in a way that forces me to not use the word racism. And I just have, the word just has been so overused,
Yeah.
and it has just, on some levels, not only has it been overused, but it's even also been exploited to a certain degree. And so I try to explain situations and scenarios to them in a way that doesn't use the word racism unless it really have to. But I say all that to say it's definitely forced me to be more creative with regards to thinking about, again, perspective. What's the lens that I'm going to have them look at it from? And when we've talked about injustice or prejudice or unfairness, it's a direct conversation. However, we focus on, what's happening in the situation and the circumstances. Is this, a systemic thing that our country needs to work on? Is it, or is this, a situation that we can take personal accountability for and say, what can we do better as an individual? And a lot of times the solution is a mix of the two or three, right? There's things that you can do as an individual that will change how you respond to prejudice, right? If the moment something happens and it's prejudice and you just go out there and just, fight at it really hard, you might not get that far.
Yeah.
But if you're able to be smart about how you're going to elevate others and how you're going to do it, then you'll have probably more of a shift. You'll have more of an impact. And things are always sort of written around what your impact story is, right? And I think that, like, with my kids, what we've done with them is to bring them into what's happening in the world. When I was younger, I would say my parents were probably a little bit more sheltered, although we always did see the news. I will say that. But one of the things that we have found to be really strong is having the conversations at home. And so, if they should experience something that they have either heard us talk about or they've seen it on the news and we've had that conversation, or something has showed up in social media and we bring that conversation to the dinner table, I think that's where it starts to happen. And we can talk about some of the layers involved.
Yeah.
But yeah, I try not to. I know my children, I mean, my daughters, they know that they're black girls. I mean, I don't need to like beat them over the head with it. And they know that, you know, they're smart, and they know that there are inequities out there, and they know that some of those inequities are slanted unfairly towards them. And so I think that the other part of parenting that has been instrumental is coming up with, whether it's sports or activities and things that we intentionally put them in, so that they can experience some of it themselves. Like, they really get to see, how do I handle that, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I can't wait till you're a grown adult for you to really know how to advocate for yourself. So we put them in activities. One of the things, my daughters love tennis, right? And so tennis is a sport where you got to figure out, before the end of the before the match is over, you got to figure out how to win, and you have to problem solve. And if somebody is doing something that's unfair, you have to go get the line judge. I
Yeah.
can see the person making a bad call, but I can't do anything. I'm on the sidelines.
Yeah.
They have to understand how to advocate for themselves and use their voice. And I think all of that starts at home. So for us, we focus really more on empowering them with the tools around how to respond to it versus, like, being reactionary
Yeah.
and just, being angry about it.
Perfect. What was your main learning so far with this pandemic?
Whew. Well, one, I mean, I don't know. I got like two or three rolling through my mind right now, but one of the biggest ones is how we're dealing and navigating through uncertainty, right? When that pandemic hit, it was almost like the earth shook and everything in it that you thought was a foundation was gone.
Yeah.
And there was so much that we didn't know. And at the time when it first happened, there was such a huge, reaction to what was happening with the outbreak and the deaths, and watching the news and what was coming into your mind, what was infiltrating your headspace every day. And you needed to know some of this information because it was about surviving, and it was about protecting and safety for yourself and your family, your loved ones. But then it also got to a point where you maybe knew too much, and it was just filling up your brain and consuming your thoughts. And I know, even for me, it was consuming my dreams. And I mean, it was just like all the time. And I had
Yeah.
to, like, intentionally remove myself from how much I was absorbing when it came to the media and when it came to all the projections that were happening out there. But I'll say one of the things I learned is about the resilience of the human spirit. This pandemic was an amazing demonstration of, in as much as we had uncertainty and we were reacting to it, we also had such resolve and resiliency in our human spirit, like the strength and the fortitude that the human race can do and have. When you saw those nurses, and again, I hats off, I've got nurses in my family. My sister is a nurse and my mom was a nurse, and they're both have been COVID nurses when the pandemic started early on. But watching those doctors and watching those nurses and everybody else that was a part of this, everyone who played a hand in this, seeing the kindness and the strength, and yet just the sacrifice. I mean, it was just look, I mean, half the time, yes, I was absorbing the information on the news. The other time, I'm crying because I was
Yeah.
just, oh my God, oh my, the stories never ended when it came to really the depiction of the strength of the human spirit and what we can do when we do function as a collective, right?
Yeah.
We can see what we can do when we are inclusive, what's achievable. It just gave you sort of like highlight reels on what's possible. And I think that was something huge that you know, I knew, but to watch it and see it and through all the different situations that were happening, the ways that we were going out of doing the things we could do to bring joy to others,
Yeah.
the things that we could do just to put a smile on someone's face, doing the things that we could do to not only help our family and loved ones, but to help other people, bringing in all of our collective strengths together. It was beautiful. It really was.
Yeah.
And so, as challenging as it is, and we're still in this pandemic now, we're still going through it. We know so much more now. I would say that's one of the biggest things that I took away from it.
And how do you take care of yourself physically and mentally?
Okay. Well, so mentally, I do a wellness break. Uh, yeah, I do a wellness break every day for 30 minutes. Um, and I meditate every morning. And I've
Okay.
been meditating for like almost like 20 years now. Meditation is a huge part of my lifestyle. It's a huge part of how I'm able to navigate through the challenges, but also it's just that time of listening, right? And it goes back to that communication again.
Yeah.
Um, Another thing that I do to sort of exercise my muscles is um, I go to the gym probably like 4 days a week. So
Wow.
yeah, and I do HIIT training, and so that's really really good. I love that. I also enjoy doing yoga, which really again is just and I like the Bikram yoga, which is the hot yoga, but I also like some of the vinyasa movements that are softer and more gentler as well. So it just depends on what's happening. But yeah, I would definitely say yoga, meditation, and food. My diet. I love to eat. I'm a foodie, but I am disciplined with how much I indulge, so to speak. So when it comes to my food, that's important to me. My mother will tell you, like, I mean, when my kids, they're like, yeah, she loves to eat. Like, I remember countries and cities based upon the restaurants. I mean, I'm like,
I
I'm like,
love to
oh,
eat too. I understand you.
yeah, I will travel to eat. Yeah. So so yeah, but I do have to exercise. And I do follow a regimen 4 times a year where I do a fasting regimen 4 times a year as the change of season is coming. So it's a whole regimen that I follow when it comes to increasing my vegetables, eating raw and doing juicing during those times, and cleansing during those times. But I would say those are some of my secrets. The rest of it is really just doing a better job of living in the moment and doing the things that bring you joy. I recently just ordered myself a painting set so that I could get back into painting.
Wow.
Yeah, I was like, let me get my canvas back out. I haven't done this since I was maybe in middle school.
Yeah.
Um, but it's just sort of like reconnecting with the things that bring you joy and remembering what they are. And the rest of it is just hanging out with friends. My 3 things I love to do is good company, good music, and good food. Like I'm,
Great.
I don't
Great.
need. That's all I need for an amazing night.
Yeah, I agree with you. I agree. Totally agree. And if you could list three main abilities that new leaders of the future, should have, what would be those three abilities?
Emotional intelligence, like literally every skill set under the hat of emotional intelligence. So that involves empathy, that involves communication, that involves caring.
Yeah.
Yeah, it involves situational leadership. It involves so many different competencies just under that one umbrella of emotional intelligence. So I would say that is a huge. That is one. Innovation. They have to be innovative in the 21st century. I think leadership and leaders have to know that, you know, systems that are older, antiquated, are no longer going to be relevant, and they have to make sure that they can embrace those things and they can leverage using technology in a way that is conducive towards enhancement, improvement, and using technology in a way that um, globalization is already forcing us to do.
Yeah.
So they need the skills to do that. And I would say the last big one is change management. Uh, Change is constant, as I mentioned, it's happening all the time. And I think the leaders who are highly resistant to change, they will be again left behind, or they'll be redesigning, they'll have to redesign a new way of doing things, or they will be outdated on how they do
Yeah.
it. So they have to be open to change. And that means they have to be open minded.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. So, what keeps you awake at night?
Aside from my teenagers and the teenager conversations that we have to have.
And
Um,
you already have one that can drive. In the
what?
US, they can drive at 16.
Yeah, she just finished the driver's ed class, so she's got to take the test. But I was like,
Oh, oh.
now we need to like take you to the empty parking lots so you can practice. Because I'm like, yeah. So we haven't gotten to the empty parking lots yet because we're literally like 2 weeks shy of finishing out her junior year.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, that's definitely just envisioning her sitting at the wheel is enough. It's just the vision. It's just what's happening in your mind, right? It's not happening in real life. But I'm like, oh my gosh. And people, where I am in Florida, I mean, they drive,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
they drive crazy sometimes.
Yeah.
We've got some drivers that are risky, let's just say.
Yeah.
So I mean, just envisioning her on the road, I'm like, um, meditate, meditate, meditate. Don't have a panic attack, meditate. Um, but I would say what else keeps me up at night is um thinking about the thinking about how we're gonna work through the stuff, right? There's a lot of stuff, and there's a lot of stuff that's stuck,
Yeah.
and I'm my brain, that's why the meditation is so important, because like it helps me to like just settle that down and get into that stillness and not be just so over exhausting my mind. But yeah, in the late night hours, I mean, I think about that. I think about what the earth will be like when the children inherit it, like when my children grow older.
Mm-hmm.
And I think my succession story is that I want to be that I was a part of the conversation or a part of the people that was trying to lead things in a forward thinking way, so
Yeah.
that the way that they inherit it is a little bit better, at least a little bit better than the way it was when we inherited it. So I think about the future. I think about solving these problems. I think about what that looks like for, my children's generation, your children's generation, like, and are we doing enough to, minimize the damage, so to speak? I ask myself, are they ready to inherit the problems that we're creating right now. And yeah, that's the kind of stuff that keeps me out.
Yeah, I understand that. I always have this kind of thoughts as
Yeah,
well. And it's quite hard to deal with those thoughts.
right. Because there's nothing like conclusive on any of
Yeah,
it. It's just the brain is ruling you at that point. You're just
yeah.
running with what it's telling you. But yeah.
What is your biggest dream now?
Oh, my biggest dream now is I want to be able to have a legacy that my children are proud of. And that they inherit something more than I do believe that, like, my parents being first generation immigrants, and that they made a lot of sacrifices for me and my siblings to be here and to be raised in America and to have the life that we have. And then I do believe in passing that baton further, that we stand on their shoulders. And so it's almost like I take it as an obligation, like a
Mm-hmm.
responsibility, that, we should move the needle further along so that our children get something better. So that is something that really sits with me as far as just like one of my dreams. And the other big dream that I would say that I have that's recurring is like what this world can be like if the promise of DEI is fulfilled. Like,
Wow, that's a great question.
we we talk about diversity, equity, inclusion in our quantum power talk, and we talk about, obviously the data and information that supports around diversity, equity, inclusion, and what that means for the workforce. But if that can be manifested, and I'm here to see that like actually happen, that is a big dream. That's something that I frequently daydream about. Like, yeah,
Wow.
we can really, if we could do this, and again, it's a little, it's the kind of the childlike essence in me that continues to be a dreamer, right? And continues to be an optimist. But even if it's done a little bit, maybe it's not everybody, but every time that we meet with another leadership team, or every time that we engage with another audience, and when it's done, they're like, oh my gosh, now we're ready to at least start to think about having a DEI framework, within our organization. That's big. Like,
Yeah.
to me, I'm like, yeah, that's the promise. Like, that's what we're talking about. Like,
Yeah.
that's what we get up for, and that's what pumps us up, and that's what's getting our adrenaline pumping, is the fact of like, if we touch leaders in that way and they're inspired to do that, it's like, wow. So I'm always daydreaming about the multiplier effect. I'm like, oh, if we can multiply that, how many every times
Yeah.
over, da 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 da, what would this world be like, right?
Yeah.
And of course, it's a far-fetched dream. I'll never have the answer to it, and may not live to see the full manifestation of that. But I certainly enjoy this part of the journey of experiencing it in smaller increments here and there.
Yeah. That's how we nurture hope.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. And faith, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And if you weren't afraid of anything, what would you do that you haven't done yet?
If I wasn't afraid, huh, what would I do that I have? Well, I don't know. Probably something like, I mean, I am afraid of it, but I also have this like deep desire to do it, which is skydiving.
Yeah.
Um, and I actually have myself that I'm going to do it this year.
Really?
Actually,
So
yeah,
you need to tell me when you do it.
yeah. I'm supposed to do it for my birthday this year, which is in
Yeah.
October. Yeah. So,
Okay.
so yeah, I'll have to remember to send you an email, because I'm obviously I'm like, I've jumped off of like, waterfalls and things of that nature. Not anything like crazy, but like to skydive is like obviously way more.
I used to say that I would love to skydive, but then I became a mom. So it's not gonna happen in this life.
Right. That's the other thing. Like motherhood, like you're more risk averse.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh no, what was I thinking when I said that? So yeah, all my girlfriends tell me that. They're like, girl, I will meet you on the ground. You let me know when the jump is over and we'll have dinner, we'll eat. But yeah, I do want to skydive. It is something that I was actually scheduled to skydive once before, but then I found out I was pregnant with my second daughter.
Whoa.
They were like, oh, we've got to cancel your appointment. You're in your first trimester. I found out I was, in my first trimester. I was like, oh, I guess I got to reschedule that. And I never did. And so I think it's just sort of like that kind of follow through in me. I'm like, you know what? I said I wanted to do this. I've always wanted to do it for a long, long time. It's time for this energy to come out of me by actually
Yeah,
doing it.
that's
So,
great.
yeah.
So let me know when you do it. So before my last question, I just want to say thank you to everyone that was here with us with this great, inspiring conversation with Soyini. And now I will shift for Portuguese. Sexta-feira nós não teremos o programa, porque eu vou estar em trânsito. Então, excepcionalmente, nessa sexta, nós não teremos o programa. Voltamos na semana que vem, a terça e na sexta, ao vivo, às 6 da tarde, com grandes convidados. Eu já publiquei aqui quais são os convidados do mês. Então, venham com a gente. So, Soyini, you already talked about legacy. You said you want to leave a legacy your girls are proud of. So, what is this legacy? How do you want to be remembered?
I want them to remember me as a strong woman. I want them to, hopefully remember some of those nuggets and those conversations that we have with each other, right? That it'll come back and hit them later on. But I want to be remembered as somebody who really authentically showed up to do the work. That it wasn't, it wasn't something that I took lightly. It was something that they can say, Soyini, she really tried to help us with this or do that. Like, I want people to know that I did do the best that I could to help them. And I think that goes back to that little girl who said, I wanted to be a doctor because I want to help people. But I do want that to be a part of my legacy, that they'll know that, I did the best that I could do, and I tried to be better in doing so. And yeah, and I want my daughters to remember me as a strong woman who they were inspired by, but also that just cared. I think if you rethink how you care for others and how you treat people, it's going to shift everything for you.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I want that to be a part of, what people will say about me when I'm not here. Like, she really cared. She really cared. It mattered to her.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your time, for this such inspiring conversation. And we're going to be connected. When I go to Florida, I want to give you a big hug.
Yes. I will meet you at the airport. You tell me. Because I am minutes away from the airport.
That's great. And we have a lot to exchange about the work we are doing on diversity, equity, and inclusion. So let's be connected. It was a great pleasure finally bringing you to the program.
Thank you so much, Nevi. I'm so grateful for this conversation today and grateful for your time and grateful for the effort that you're putting into the space on a daily basis. Just with, again, the conversations, I've listened to some of them that you've had with other thought leaders, and I just can't stop, again, being inspired by that, but also recognizing that that collective effort is really going to shift and move things forward, you know. So hats off to you. I'm inspired by you as well in the work that you're doing, and I understand that, you know, the more that our collective minds can do this, the better for others. So thank you for having me today. I appreciate your time, your energy, and thank you for this interview. This was a great opportunity.
Thank you. Have a great day.
You too.
Bye bye.